Hello Internet, I'm Jackie Fox and this video is going to be a little bit different. Big content warnings because there are a lot of abuses discussed with all sorts of women involved. A lot of those come firsthand from women who live in this area. I wish I could tell you that the abuses that we've heard about were limited just to the women inside of the facility, even though that disgusting fact was enough to get me to drive from North Carolina to Georgia, but it turns out that isn't the case, and you're going to see that in the video in some really viscerally upsetting stories. First, we're going to get into some footage that I shot that gets into a little bit of what we know, what is in the public media, and then we're just going to keep going deeper. This is going to be the first of two videos on an increasingly upsetting topic, and the deeper down this rabbit hole you go with me, the more upsetting it's going to get. So for this particular video, I'm more going to be covering stuff that was already available in the news. It's pretty upsetting, but it gets a lot viscerally worse in part 2. If you feel like you can handle the stuff you've already heard and you just want to hear more, this video is a good starting point. And if you can handle that, maybe try number 2. But if this video is too much for you, the second is definitely going to be a hard watch. So let's get into it.
Ms. Wooten, I want to start with you and just ask you to tell us what you did. What was your job at this facility? When did you start working there?
I was first employed at Irwin County Detention Center in 2010. I've been to this facility on three different occasions. I returned in 2014, worked until 2016, came back in 2019. I was a nurse there, a medication nurse. I worked 6A to 6P. We did total detainee and total inmate care were my responsibilities there.
You talk about in the complaint a hearing from women who are detained there, talking about a specific doctor performing hysterectomies, referring to him as a uterus collector. Tell us about how you heard about this doctor and what women said about their experiences with him.
You will have detained women. I had several detained women on numerous occasions that would come to me and say, Miss Wooten, I had a hysterectomy. Why? I had no answers as to why they had those procedures. And one lady walked up to me here this last time around between October of 19 until July the 2nd. And she said, what is he? Is he the uterus collector? Does he collect uteruses? And I asked her, what does she mean? And she says, everybody that I talked to has had a hysterectomy. And you just don't know what to say. I mean, I don't have a answer for why that they would come to me and they would say, is he the uterus collector?
How would you describe the standard of care, the general sort of medical environment in which these migrants were detained?
The standard of care it wasn't timely all the time. They would have a procedure to where they would fill out forms to be seen. Those forms would be shredded. They would be told in area instances that, there's nothing going on with them, just on numerous occasions. And as a human, you just don't treat people inhumane. I have a title as a licensed practical nurse, and I protect my title with dignity to where I was raised by you treat people as you want to be treated. The sanitation, especially during COVID, the sanitation was horrible. We didn't have anything to sanitize with. We didn't have the proper PPE. So they didn't have the proper PPE. They didn't have anything to sanitize with while they were down in the dorms as well. And when you ask, you would be reprimanded.
Did you have cases of COVID in that facility? What were the steps taken to deal with it as the outbreak in the country happened?
When we first had the first case of COVID there in the facility, it was COVID is not here in the facility. Then we had another case and it was like COVID was not here in the facility. We had several more cases and it was like COVID was not here in the facility. You know, there was not a proper separation of those detainees whenever they come in. You know, there's a 14-day incubation period. You know, they weren't separated. You know, whenever you question and then you didn't have the proper PPE, I admit I refuse. I have sickle cell. I have kids that have underlying conditions as well. They're asthmatics. So the protocol was not being followed. It was not properly reported to the health department. It was not properly reported to the CDC, nor was it properly reported to LaSalle.
You were essentially demoted, as my understanding from the complaint, right? That from a full-time employee to sort of a more kind of at-will swing employee. Your contention is that that was essentially punishment for your statements about the unsafe environment you felt there, your resistance to working when you had symptoms. Is my understanding correct there?
Yes, that's correct.
Mr. Woody, you look like you want to say something. What do you want to say?
Well, I did want to jump in and say that Ms. Wooten has been a vocal critic of the conditions within the facility for many months, and the most recent retaliation of demoting her was, to some extent, was just a buildup of all of her internal whistleblowing over the course of months, and especially since the beginning of COVID.
I am today on location here in Irwin County, Georgia. I am pretty close to the Ocilla Detention Center that many of you have heard about on the news. And they basically got caught performing mass hysterectomies on unwilling women. Many of the times they didn't even speak English, so there really isn't a way that they could have given consent. I don't really feel like they had interpreters explain this to them. We're hearing a lot of things. Perhaps it is good to take this with a grain of salt. Because right now I think we just have the word of a whistleblower. Seems credible. I don't see why she would lie about this. There's a lot of people who have corroborated this story. We don't have maybe like hard facts yet, like medical records, but at the same time, if you were doing this, would you keep medical records? I don't think so. I can't imagine why you would. During the week after this news broke, I had a lot on my plate with school, working on videos. I didn't have a lot of time to do a ton of research into this. I did a lot of driving. I ended up sleeping in a Walmart parking lot the night before, and there was a story that broke through the AP that day that I was unaware of when I filmed the previous part that you saw. So let's talk about that particular article and what we know, and then we'll get back to protest footage on site. One of the women that they mentioned in here is a 39-year-old woman from Cuba. She was told she would have an operation to treat ovarian cysts, but even now she has no idea what procedure she actually got. She's being represented by a lawyer, and they're going to figure this out, so we should know in time. But there's a lot of stories like this. When she requested medical records, the Irwin County Detention Center gave her over 100 pages, and that showed a diagnosis of the cysts, but, and this is important, there was absolutely nothing from the day of the surgery. She said, quote, "The only thing they told me was, you're going to go to sleep, and when you wake up, we will have finished." The doctor in question is Mahendra Amin. a doctor whom we're really going to get into later, but for right now I'm just going to tell you what's in this AP report, because for one, I want you to see the difference between what you can find out on scene at one of these things and what they are willing to report in the news. And part of this is, you know, I'm not a journalist. I don't have the same fact-checking and verification procedures that they do. So I am taking a lot of these people at their word, but the stories you're going to hear are graphic, and while I can't confirm them, I don't really have the press credentials or the authority to really get information out of these people. And one thing that you're going to see with a lot of these news agencies is they're having trouble doing it as well. But what I want to do with this video is to open the question, show you firsthand accounts, and get those investigated. I want to raise the profile of this so that we know what we're looking for and we know who to ask and where to look. The AP got 4 sets of medical records for 4 different women, and they interviewed them and their lawyers, and this revealed growing allegations that Amin had performed surgeries and other procedures on detained immigrants that they did not seek and did not fully understand. And again, this is a pattern with this doctor that we're going to talk about later. Some of these procedures could be justified based on the problems that were documented in the records, but the women's lack of consent or knowledge raises several severe legal and ethical issues, said both lawyers and medical experts. According to records, Amin has performed surgery or other gynecological treatment on at least 8 women detained at the center since 2017, including at least 1 hysterectomy, according to an immigration and civil rights lawyer. AP is quick to note that they did not find evidence of mass hysterectomies as alleged in the whistleblower complaint. Another thing that this AP article points out is that this is a private facility which is run by LaSalle Corrections. And this is a great and troubling problem because, as many people who were there that day said, and as has been noted of these private facilities in the past, not only are they tend to be paid more than public government-run facilities per person, they also spend less per person. So this is an incredible money-making racket for them. And one of the biggest complaints that you're going to see throughout this is that they absolutely outsource everything to the lowest bidder, and they do not provide many things that should be absolutely basic for human decency. The AP also found records for a woman that was given a hysterectomy. She reported irregular bleeding and was taken to Dr. Amin. A lab study showed signs of early cancer called a carcinoma. It's important to note that a hysterectomy is not the only way that they could have gone. It was possible to let this woman keep her uterus, but that is not the decision that Amin made. Instead of just removing the cancer, he took away her right to reproduce. And this enthusiasm to perform hysterectomies that are medically unnecessary is something that's going to come up a lot when we're talking about Dr. Amin. The AP also found a woman who went in for a surgical procedure known as a dilation and curettage. Pretty sure I'm pronouncing that right. We're just going to call it a DNC, and it removes tissue from the uterus and can be used as a treatment for excessive bleeding. The woman in question was experiencing an irregular menstrual cycle and was told to have a DNC. When she woke up from the surgery, though, she found out that one of her 2 fallopian tubes had been removed. The medical records here indicate that, as a part of the procedure, Amin discovered that the tube was swollen. She said that he told her, quote, "The reply that he gave was that they were in there anyways and found there was this problem." There's a couple issues with this story. Some that are just suspicious and some that are severe. First, the removal of the tube just because it was swollen was likely unnecessary. Second, doctors question how Amin even discovered the swollen tube because performing a DNC would not normally involve exploring a woman's fallopian tubes. Perhaps the most important thing here is that, quote, It's established U.S. law that you do not operate on everything that you find. If you're in a teaching hospital and an attending physician does something like that, it's a scandal and they're fired. The point is that she was never given the opportunity to consent to this procedure because it happened while she was under sedation. She was knocked out for the DNC and they just did this anyways, without ever consulting her about it.
Hello? It's 1 o'clock, or getting pretty close to it. A lot of people have showed up. There's at least 50 cars, minimum, at least 100 people, and it's actually a little bit harder to get a head count because there is probably a 20 or so car caravan at this point. About 10 of them just showed up. That's the video you should have just seen. There were also another 10 that were lining up when I got here. So the 10 that just showed up joined up with them. There's anywhere from like 2 to maybe 3 or 4 people in each car, so that could be another close to 100, so maybe 200 people here, which might be surprising because I've found out about the Facebook page. I'm going to be showing you some of the live stream video from that in lieu of asking around a whole lot for interviews. I am going to try to make some friends and try to talk to some locals. I have heard some really interesting stories from locals already, and this gets on to one of the parts of the one of the parts of this issue that isn't getting as much press, or at least it isn't getting the headlines. It isn't, stories aren't leading with this because the accusation of mass hysterectomies is a big thing, as it should be. But the conditions related to COVID are appalling here. From one person who had a family member, not even like a Hispanic family member, like this is apparently an ICE detention center, as we've heard, and it's not just for that, it's a private prison, so they make money any way that they can. They're willing to take American citizens, whoever, and cram them in these cells. And they said that there are 6+ people in each cell at a minimum. So obviously, nowhere near social distancing, not even like what you would expect in regular prison conditions. That's not. I mean, that's all appalling, obviously. The reason that isn't bigger news is that that's honestly the status quo that we've been expecting out of these type of facilities. And that's the kind of cruelty that is called for and often justified by the right, because they want to use these facilities as a deterrent. What they don't understand is that a lot of migrants are fleeing some pretty terrible conditions themselves, and all we're accomplishing is putting them between a rock and a hard place. We're not going to deter a lot of these people just because of how bad the conditions are that they're fleeing from. The chance that they might have a life of freedom here is enough, no matter what we do, probably. So it's just like, even from that awful perspective, this just isn't effective. We're doing cruelty and potentially genocide for no reason. That should be appalling even to the right. Like, have you stopped and thought about what you're advocating for? Because it doesn't even make sense. It's just racist, honestly. All of the footage that I'm getting here, anything that you see, feel free to reuse it. I mean, that's pretty true of any of my videos. I'm never gonna come at you for copyright. I don't really believe that heavily in copyright, and I definitely believe in the idea of fair use. Even if you're just reposting my videos, I don't care. Like, I mean, it would be a little egregious, just a little bit. I would be kind of annoyed if you reposted my full video and cut out the Patreon links at the end. That would be a little bit annoying. I mean, if you're just gonna clip it, I don't give a shit. Because I'm not really making this for money. Although, in this particular case, I have gone through the entire 2 nights of housing, maybe. I don't know. I need to see how long this is going to be happening. It might just be today. The Facebook event is for today. I don't know if they have anything tomorrow. Haven't really checked yet. Kind of, you know, focusing more on the protests than I am trying to necessarily do information gathering. But, you know, that in addition to gas, wear and tear on my car, this has not been a cheap trip for me. That being said, there are people here from Georgia, California. Wait. God damn it. Georgia, obviously. We're in Georgia. A lot of people from Georgia. But there's also people from California. There's also people from Florida. There's also people... which I think I'm sitting behind Michigan in the parking area. So, a lot of people made longer trips than I have. But this is definitely one of those videos where I'd appreciate a couple bucks from you to help me kind of recoup this. But honestly, I'm doing this because it needs to be done, not because I think I'm going to make the money back, not because I expect you to give me a cent, but it'd be cool. It would be cool to, like, I don't know, socialize my losses on this trip.
Well, it's happened again. This video became so long and so complex that it completely overwhelmed my computer's ability to deal with it whatsoever. And I'm gonna have to break it into 2 parts, even though I wanted to present both what we already knew and what I learned from listening to personal accounts at the protest in one complete package. But, you know, that's probably for the best. So, I'm gonna roll credits, but tune in next time because we're gonna see how much deeper this rabbit hole goes. Just one more thing before I roll credits on this. I recently became aware of the No Comrades Under 1K sub, and I would just like to throw up on the screen some comrades that I'm subscribed to that have not yet reached 1,000 subs, but I really feel like they deserve it. So check these channels out, like their videos, give them a subscription, do what you can to help them out, share them on Facebook, whatever social media platforms you happen to be on, and let's try to build a stronger community together. I'm Jackie Fox, and my content will always be ad-free because I'm eschewing corporate donations to the channel. I just ask that if you can donate a little bit of money on Patreon like these fine, foxy folks, or if you want to make a one-time donation, you can donate on Ko-fi. If you're looking for another way to support the channel, I'm also making Fox hats with my logo on them. They are currently in the design phase, and I'm willing to allow people to ask for customized hats. Prices may vary depending on the cost of labor to manufacture them, because I want to make sure that my workers are paid fairly.